Unfortunately, as we mentioned, at a very sad time when we talk about the death of one of South Africa's most iconic musicians. So what is your reaction to this?
Thank you. Good evening to the viewers at home. Obviously, it is indeed a very sad moment for our country. Mr. Johnny Clegg has contributed a lot for social cohesion. As Mr. Mabuza was speaking, I heard him. He's a person who could have chosen a life of privilege, but he chose to stand with the less privileged, with the affected, most South Africans. And I think we will always remember him for that and for his contribution for our country. Even in a post-democratic South Africa, he continued to highlight social issues. And I think he was a good person for our country and a good ambassador, a touring figure in his field.
Just speaking
I therefore convey my condolences to him, to his family, and his supporters. And all the people of South Africa.
So, Minister, just speaking about the budget that you just tabled for the year 2019 to 2020, you first started by dedicating your maiden budget to Sindiso Makaka. And I'm wondering, how do you feel about the fact that no one has been brought to book for his murder?
Yes, it is a very sad indeed that we had to remember such a gallant fighter, a young person with a promising future. But at least we find solace to the fact that his trial is going to start this October, and there are people who have been arrested. And we are saying, let justice be done in this instance, because it's important that a message is sent that any political issues or activists and any other situation must be dealt with through our constitutional processes. The barrel of a gun can't be a response to the challenges of our country.
But having said that, you're obviously very familiar with the concept of justice delayed is justice denied. So you would then know that this would also apply to the families of not only Sindiso Makaka, Senzo Meyiwa, and many other less high-profile murders. What do you intend to do about the slow process that has deeply affected many families in the country?
Indeed, and we have stated it in the budget speech that the amount of violent crime, some of the lack of conviction in some of these matters are a serious concern that the criminal justice cluster need to look into. We obviously will have to upskill the entire value chain of the criminal justice cluster, from the police, the National Prosecuting Authority, which is having struggles financially, but also in terms of a 20% vacancy rate. And these are people who need to help us to deal with the scourge of crime across the country. So we need to be able to give them support, and it's for that reason that we've resuscitated the program of aspirant prosecutors, and also helped the establishment of the new investigating unit with a meager amount of about 8 million, which is still not enough. So we are also in engagement with the National Treasury so that we see how do we help the National Prosecuting Authority, particularly with the serious budget constraints that is affecting the institution.
You would admit that it's more than budgetary constraints. Minister Shamila Batoyi lamenting recently that a huge part of the problem is the internal corruption within the system, not only the fact that there is lack of dedicated and able staff, but the fact that they too are divided, unfortunately, along political lines.
Obviously, as the new head of the NDPP, as the ministry, we have created an environment through the constitution and through the laws that governs the NPA, that the head of the NPA will be able to deal with the internal issues at the NPA, and we are going to give all the necessary support that the NPA needs, which is within our available means and resources, because this needs not only the NPA, it needs also the whole country to rally behind the renewal, the revival, and the uplifting of the morale of the members of the National Prosecuting Authority.
The President did say in his State of the Nation address that obviously the directorate being charged with prosecuting some of the crimes or cases that have been revealed by the various commissions. It has its work set out for it. You mentioned in your budget speech that there's very chilling evidence coming out of these commissions. What do you find most alarming?
Obviously, is the evidence in terms of which we see across all the commissions, which we have obviously said we want to see the commissions having their own lives. We don't want to run a live commentary on how the commissions must function. But obviously, we need to prepare and make the NPA to be ready, the Special Investigating Unit to also start to be ready. And it's for that reason that we are helping them to establish the Special Investigating Unit so that they are able, and as and when they see evidence, they're able to react and act accordingly in terms of the facts before them.
Then let's take you to
without any fear or favor.
Let's take you then to the State Capture Commission, which you've also mentioned in your budget has increased your overall budget by something like 7% because of what you've had to give it. What are your reactions to some of the allegations being made there, especially with the appearance of former President Jacob Zuma?
Obviously, I may not be able to give a running commentary to the commission, and we will obviously from government await the outcomes and the recommendation from Judge Zondo. It is important that we give the commission its life. But the Judge President Zondo, the Judge Deputy President Zondo has already said that there is nothing that stops all law enforcement agencies to act and be able to investigate whatever that is being raised from the commission and be able to do their job as and when they deem it necessary, as guided by the prescripts and the laws of our country.
I'd like to hear what your thoughts are and looking at the criminal justice system as a whole, especially in light of not only the allegations, but the various arms of law that would need to be involved in prosecuting some of these cases. You've mentioned the fact that there are going to be reforms. What kind of reforms do you have envisioned?
Obviously, with the life now of the fourth industrial revolution, we have to modernize our entire justice system, and we exemplified it with a relay that, it's like a relay effect from police, from the NPA, to the judges, up until people are at the correctional centers. So for us to be able to run an efficient system, we need to be able to gather data which is available of people through the Home Affairs, and the systems must be able to speak to each other up until correctional service. Some of the investigations need to be done through the new technologies, and we have also given examples of how we've already implemented in some of the aspects of the criminal justice system, including the payments of maintenance through technology, and we want to extend it to various operations of the department so that technology becomes the center of our operations. This will enable us to run an efficient system.
Technology is all very good, but I'm wondering, where do you believe are the critical areas, if you're talking about skills upgrade, that is sorely needed?
I can't hear properly the question.
So I'm asking, technology is all very well and good, but where have you identified as the most urgent in terms of skills upgrades?
Is the NPA with regard to the program of the aspirant prosecutors, so that we're also able not only to upgrade the aspirant prosecutors, but also to be able to recruit mid-management, because that is also the space where the NPA was mostly affected. Also to upgrade and help the Special Investigation Unit with their own programs of recruiting for their intake, and also to upskill their employees to be able to run investigations that can be able to withstand scrutiny, and also for us to make the special tribunal that is going to start soon in the next 2 or 3 months, so that is able to run and be able to recover the monies that have been stolen through fraud and corruption in the various state-owned entities and departments.
All right, I want to talk about the integrated criminal justice framework, that legislation that was approved in 2017, that you say you're going ahead with implementation or enactment. What is the benefit, especially for victims of crime and even just those who are at the other end of it?
Yes, it's a very beneficial system. As I said, that I view this as a relay effect, that the criminal justice system need to be integrated from police up until a person is at correctional services. With regard to the victims of crime, it's also important that there is some kind of interaction with them to give feedback, to also some kind of counseling, but also to ensure that the victims of crime, they feel that they are part of the justice system. They don't only end when they give evidence and when we want to now give parole to some of the inmates. So they must be able to be the part of the process. This will enable us to have a seamless process that will even help the integration in society of the inmates, but also in some of the instances we have got successes at correctional services of a situation where ended well between the victims and some of the inmates.
And I'm going to point you to some examples. We're talking about child courts, we're talking about sexual offences courts, specialised ones which have been created, but they still get clogged down in the systems. What improvements are you looking at?
Yes, obviously there has been clogged down, but there's also been successes in the system, particularly with the sexual offences crime. As you speak about them, it's about 74% conviction rate that we have reported. The improvements that we'll need to do is particularly on the technology, because some of the children may not be able to give evidence directly in our courts. We already have systems of technology and cameras, but we need to improve them so that they don't find themselves again in a situation where they are scared to give evidence because they might be interacting with some of the offenders and so forth. So that is the delicate situation we're looking into.
Speaking about it, delicate, Minister, you are well aware that this program, Fullview, visited a correctional centre in Boksburg, and you've put much emphasis on rehabilitative justice as opposed to retributive. And some of those, some would argue, are children who could have been handled in a better way. Say, for instance, a first-time offender who's from a different country, doesn't even know the language. Which ways do you think the law could improve in creating better circumstances of correcting offenders?
Yes, it's true, and that's why we're saying we're going to look into the reviewing of some of the laws relating to the Criminal Justice Procedure Act, the Correctional Services Act, so that we also find a way in some of the petty crimes of non-custodial sentences, because some of the petty crimes can be handled differently, and with the offenders being integrated or being rehabilitated while they don't interact with our current inmates and they become hardcore. So those are all the issues.
So how do you see that playing out,
in
Minister?
the entire?
How do you see that playing out?
Obviously, we look at it. We see it playing out in a manner that will enable us to rehabilitate people without integrating them into the whole inmate which we have today. Because that will enable us to also have people that are dedicated in terms of psychology, in terms of counseling and rehabilitation, but also in terms of them being some kind of community service. That can also be some form of punishment. But all those are processes that we're undergoing, which will enable us to be able to report soon on as to how we're going to review the processes to enable us to do that.
I need to ask you a question about, you spoke about violent and contract crimes earlier on. The Centre for Applied Legal Studies saying it wants rape added to other common cause crimes such as murder. Is this something that you would support?
They want what?
They want rape defined as other common cause crimes such as murder. They say part of the problem is the interpretation of the law, and they do believe that the issue of common purpose needs to be investigated. What is your point of view?
Now, obviously, we still need to be guided by research, and we usually do the research through the Law Reform Commission. We will be guided by that, and we'll be able to respond as and when we are at preview of the research.
All right, thank you very much for your time. That is Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola speaking to us about the budget the department tabled earlier on today. Steve